Howdy folks, welcome back to the World of Tanks patch 9.3 test server for my first in-depth look at patch 9.3 after the 9.3 preview teaser. First thing we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at some of the HD models of these new tanks, and then I'm going to be taking you for a look around the new Murovanka map. The in-depth looks at these new tanks are going to come in future videos. And there's a lot of new HD models in patch 9.3, not just all of the new light tanks, which are of course rendered in HD, like the RU-251 Sparpanzer, which kind of looks like a dinky little leopard. I really like the look of this thing. Generally speaking, if you're not sure whether or not a tank has been rendered in HD, just look at the wheels. If they're actually round wheels, as opposed to hexagonal or octagonal wheels with round textures stuck on the side of them, then yeah, you know it's in HD. There's the Sparpanzer RU-251, the new German Tier 8 light tank. Moving on to the Russians, two new Russian tanks, the T-54 lightweight at Tier 8, and, well, yeah, it looks just like a T-54. Performance-wise, my initial reaction is that this tank handles and performs a lot like a Type 59. But that's just my first impression. We'll take a closer look at it again in a future video. Lovely modelling, however. You can even see the rubber on the road wheels there. And then this one, the Panther, finally has something it can cross swords with. This is the LTTB. I really like this tank. It is fast. 68 kilometers per hour top speed. Power to weight ratio, let's see. Wow, look at that. 30.59 horsepower per ton. This thing's a rocket. it is lightning fast. Terrible armour, of course, but you can't have everything. T-54 lightweight by comparison. 22.66 horsepower per ton of weight. Quite sluggish by comparison to the LTTB, which is like a rocket. And lovely, lovely model. Look, they've even dented the mud flaps there on the front. Nice weathering. Lovely little tank. I really like the look of this thing, and that gun's hilarious. It's 85mm D10 85, 11.76 rounds per minute, and it's reasonably accurate as well. 0.36 accuracy. Good aiming time too, 2.1 seconds. Nice tank. I really do like this thing. Well, moving on from the Russians, the Americans have had a whole boatload of new light tanks introduced, and some changes to an old favourite, the M24 Chaffee. There it is. It's still at Tier 5, but, well, it's kind of been nerfed and it's kind of been buffed. Again, go into more detail on these in individual tank reviews over the course of the next few days. All you need to know about the Chaffee is it's had its top speed buffed massively. It now does 77.2 kilometers per hour. But it's had that T91 gun removed. That 76mm pop gun that it used to use to utterly humiliate heavy tanks is gone. Now it's got a 75mm gun, well, a choice of two, one of which is just a slightly improved version of the other, but 96mm of penetration. Oh dear. But it's reasonably accurate and it's got a very fast aiming time. And a very good rate of fire as well, 17.14 rounds per minute. The Chaffee that we know currently in World of Tanks still kind of exists. It's just up here at Tier 6, and it's now called the T-37. And there it is. And that is basically the Chaffee that we all knew and loved at Tier 5. Only now it's at Tier 6 with 680 hit points. It's got the same gun. Actually, it's got a couple of interesting choices in guns here. There's the T91 gun that the existing Chaffee in-game has. 76mm, 150 penetration, 115 average damage, and so on and so on. But it also has this thing here. It's an autoloader. 76mm gun T102. The penetration is not great, 137mm. And 115 average damage. It's not as accurate, it takes longer to aim. 20 seconds to reload the magazine, not bad. 5 shells in a clip. So a Chaffee at tier 6 with an autoloader calling itself the T-37. Moving up to tier 7, this is the one that I really, really like. The M41 Walker Bulldog. It just looks so American. it's got that turret shape that just says USA. A lot of them seem to share the same hull, and I'm sure there are people that know more about tanks than I do. I mean, if you look at the T-37, I'm actually, let's see, vehicle details. It doesn't actually specify there. Let's have a look at the vehicle details of the Walker Bulldog. And again, it doesn't actually specify, but I'm sure the comments section of this video will be full with helpful answers from tank nerds who know more about tanks than I do, that can tell me exactly what's going on with these tanks, because they all do seem to share a very, very similar hull design, and it's only really the turrets that are different. But the M41 Walker Bulldog, haven't had much opportunity to play it yet. Driven around with it in a training room, but very, very impressed with the way it handles. It's fast, 72 kilometers per hour, and it turns on a dime. The suspension allows this thing to turn at 56 degrees per second. It's phenomenal. The power to weight ratio isn't fantastic on any of the American light tanks, however. They're all a little sluggish to get started. The Chaffee, 24.74, the T-37, 18.57, that's not good. The Walker Bulldog, 23.16, and the T-49, 23.78. And yet I didn't get the impression that any of these things were slow by any stretch of the imagination, despite the relatively low, for light tank, power to weight ratio. The Walker Bulldog gets 76mm gun, M32 late. What the hell's that? Well, 175 penetration, 150 damage, blistering 17.14 rounds per minute. Very, very fast aiming time, terrible accuracy. Amongst a whole range of other guns. There's also this autoloader here as well, which is basically a beefed up version of the autoloader that the T-37 gets. Better penetration, 175. Terrible accuracy, 0.4. 10 shells in the magazine, however. It's got a 10 round clip and takes 32 seconds to reload the entire clip with 2 seconds between shot. So that's going to be interesting. But the one that I'm sure most of you are most excited about is the T-49 with the 152mm gun. This is what you get if you lock a KV-2 and a Chaffee in a darkened room, leave them alone for half an hour, and supply lots and lots and lots of lubricant. That thing is going to be trolling E100s hard. It's tier 8 light tank with a 152mm. Well, technically we'll call it a howitzer. It was actually designed to fire the Shalani anti-tank missile. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be going, no, Jingles, that was the Sheridan, Well, this is pretty much the Sheridan. It's got the same gun. It's a light tank. The Wargaming have said the Sheridan's never going to be in the game. I think the Sheridan was an aluminium tank. Sorry, aluminum for our American cousins. But this thing here, the T-49, that gun, it's a very, very interesting gun. You get basically less than 3 shots per minute. A rate of fire of 2.61 with 76mm of penetration with high explosive, 152 with heat, and 85 with another kind of high explosive. I'll come on to that in a moment. 910 average damage with the HE, 700 with a high explosive anti-tank. Ridiculously inaccurate, 0.6. It's like a light tank version of the KV-2 at a 3.6 second aiming time. You don't have to use that gun, however. You can also use this 90mm gun. Hey, nobody's going to use the 90mm gun. Not when you can have a 152mm derp gun. But the 90mm is, well, it's not very good. The rate of fire is good, but it only has 102mm of penetration. 320 damage, though. That's not bad. Not very accurate. 0.38, 2.3 second aiming time. But look at the penetration with high explosive anti-tank ammo. 250. Now that's pretty impressive for a light tank. But the interesting thing is with the 152mm gun, this heat ammo is credit bought. It's 770 credits per shot. If you want to spend gold on this thing, or lots and lots of credits, 5,200 credits for the premium ammunition, that's high explosive. And it's pretty terrible high explosive as well. Standard credit HE ammo on this thing has 76mm of penetration for its 910 damage. The premium high explosive has 85mm of penetration for its 910 damage. The credit bought high explosive anti-tank ammo, which is what everybody's going to be using, 152mm of penetration, 700 damage. So people are going to be having fun with this tank. It's ridiculously impractical, but so is the KV-2, and that never stopped anybody playing the KV-2. Yeah, I think I'll like the T49. Now, in case anybody's thinking, whoa, wait a minute, no, this is too much for my poor brain. There are now 2 T49s in the game. What happened to the Tier 5 tank destroyer? Oh, it's bad enough trying to keep track of 2 different T28s. Well, if we have a look at the tech tree, where is it? There it is. That's now the T67 tank destroyer. They've renamed it. So no confusion. The T49 is now the Tier 8 American light tank, and the T49 that we knew and loved from patch 9.2 and before is now the T67 tank destroyer. So there you go. Confusion solved. These are not, of course, the only tanks to have gotten the HD treatment. The M5 Stuart down here at Tier 4 is also now rendered in HD, and very, very nicely indeed. They've also changed it a bit. That 75mm howitzer is gone. It's now got a selection of 2 37mm anti-tank guns. One of them is an autoloader, and it doesn't actually look any different from the existing 37mm gun. The autoloader has 5 shells in the magazine, only takes 7.6 seconds to reload, and fires each shot in 0.67 seconds. So that might be interesting, but no more 75mm howitzer and open-topped turret for the M5. The final American tank in patch 9.3, well, they call it a tank, to get an HD remodeling is the M3 Lee. There it is. The coffin for 7 brothers. They've done it over in high definition. There it is. I'm sure there's somebody out there who likes this thing. And the real thing, it wasn't a terrible tank. It certainly did the job in North Africa, but yes. Anyway, moving on swiftly. What else has been rendered in HD in patch 9.3? Well, the Russians have the IS-7. And there it is. Very, very nice. I'm sure you will agree. I like the weathering here, where the paint's been scratched off the where the turret meets the hull. And the 130mm gun, complete with the rifling. So there's the IS-7. Germany also has an HD Jagdpanther. And I was very impressed with the work that they'd done on the Jagdpanther. There it is. It's not so much the detailing as the weathering. This thing really looks like it's been out in the field, where it's been splashed with mud up the sides, and then the sun's come out, the mud's dried off, and you can see it here in all the seams in the welding. It's just, that's really, really, really nice. I have to admit, when I saw this, my initial reaction was, wow, that looks good. And my second reaction was, hang on a minute, when War Thunder, when War Thunder's tanks were first unveiled, and they were all caked in mud and stuff, didn't one of the World of Tanks developers say, oh, if my tank had ever looked like that when I was in the Russian army, I'd have been court-martialed. You'll never see tanks looking filthy like that in World of Tanks. Hang on a minute. but this is yeah. Well, if it looks good, it looks good. I'm very, very impressed with the HD modelling, particularly the weathering on the Jagdpanther. And the last tank to get an HD workover in patch 9.3 is the good old T-34 medium tank down here at tier 5. So, a whole bunch of HD tank remodels, a whole bunch of new light tanks, and a redesign of Murovanka, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at next. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new Murovanka. There it is. There have been some substantial changes on this map. I didn't really dislike Murovanka. It wasn't a terrible map, except for that bloody forest over there. I've had games on Murovanka where I've been in a tier 8 tank destroyer platoon, starting from this side of the map, and the ridge that used to exist over here was infested with all of our tier 9 heavies and tank destroyers, and they just would not move into the woods. And I had to move up and scout the woods in an AT-15 tank destroyer because the team just wouldn't get off their arse and evacuate the position that used to be here. Immensely frustrating. Well, it's all changed. What we have is there's an area of, it's sort of depression in the ground here. It's lower ground at the back in this bottom corner down in the southwest, sorry, the southeast of the map. And this is kind of an artillery safe spot, as in safe for artillery. Because the ground is so low, nobody really has a line of fire to you, but there isn't an awful lot of cover here. So you're likely to see artillery in this spot here, shooting at targets that have been lit up for them. They don't have to go very far from the cap circle to get here. Incidentally, an interesting feature in the cap circle down here to the south is the fact that there is some concealment here. There's a sneaky tree or two actually shielding direct line of fire to the cap. Not an awful lot, as you can see there. It is possible to sit in the cap and from certain lines of sight not be spotted while you're busy capping the flag out. But it's a hell of an obvious spot. If somebody's capping and you have a tank spotting from up on that ridgeline and you can't see who is in the cap circle, artillery just, drop a shot here. You're going to hit something. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Over to the forest itself, and it's technically it is still a forest, but then again it isn't at the same time. The ridgeline that was covered in all that concealment, the bushes and the trees, is gone. Technically this is still higher ground, but it's all open. There's very, very limited concealment here, just those trees. And in common with what we've seen on Malinovka, this side of the map features more low ground that you can use to outflank the forest, in the same way that you can use the low ground on Malinovka to outflank the field. And there are numerous, well, I hesitate to call them choke points here in the forest itself, but you can see where the road goes through, and the road is on lower ground. It's shielded on both sides by these small hills. However, that is a killing zone. Tanks in the woods up ahead, and you will get people camping there, are going to absolutely destroy anything that tries to come through this road here. Or at least they're going to get the first shot off. But there's not an awful lot of concealment over there, so they're going to get spotted when they fire. And there is opportunity to get flanking fire on them while staying in the low ground here and working your way around that side, and the same over here. In fact, this is probably going to be from this side here where you get most of the assaults going north through the forest, because there's just so much concealment and direct line of fire cover from all the low ground. So that's the forest from the south. So, from the northern team spawn point, looking south into the forest. Where did the flag go? Ah, it's over there. That is now where the northern team deploys. They're significantly further away from the forest than what we've been expecting in patch 9.2 and earlier, and they're a lot closer to the lighthouse and the hill on the other side of the map. Now, the team that spawns on the north is not immediately guaranteed to get all the best positions in the forest. They now have the same distance to go in order to get to the forest as the team that spawns from the south. The artillery spot to the rear of the farmhouse cluster here has also changed significantly. This used to be a hill, covered in bushes and trees, the kind of place where artillery could basically sit nice and safe and shotgun you once you got to within 50 meters, because you would just never see them. The vegetation and cover was too thick. Well, not anymore. There's still some concealment here, but not an awful lot. What's going to keep artillery safe here is the fact that it's in a depression in the ground, exactly the same as down to the southwest. I'm sorry, the southeast. It's low ground here. There is no direct line of sight to the artillery hiding spots here from there in the woods. Now, approaching the woods from the north, and I keep calling them the woods because that's, you know, it's the Murovanka magic forest, but I mean, there are some trees here, but there's nowhere near as many bushes. There's nowhere near as much concealment as there used to be. There's an awful lot of ridgelines, these small hills here with the roads leading between them, and these are what's going to keep you out of line of fire of enemy tanks. So tanks with good turrets, in kind of like the same way that people like to poke the ridge in the middle of not Murovanka, sorry, in the middle of Prokhorovka. You're going to see a lot of that kind of action going on here. But I think the majority of the fight for the forest in Murovanka is going to happen here. Here in this, well, it's not exactly a new farmhouse cluster, but it's a much bigger farmhouse cluster than anything that currently exists on Murovanka. And the reason I think most of the fighting is going to happen here is, well, a couple of reasons. First, low ground again. From here, you can only really be shot at by tanks that don't have an awful lot of cover to fire back at you from there, and if you're attacking to the south, you've kind of got the same deal. It also gives you crossfire from here on tanks that are trying to force the middle of the forest, and there's solid cover here that you can hide behind in order to shield you from return fire and get some degree of artillery safety as well. So I do think that this spot here is going to be where most of the fighting happens in the forest on Murovanka. These roads are they're just kill boxes. You'll probably see people trying to fire around the corner, but there's really nowhere to go here other than straight into the guns that are going to be waiting for you over there. But having said that, there's not an awful lot of cover there either. Not much concealment, and anybody that fires on you from this position up here is going to be revealed the second they pull the trigger. Most of the fighting, I genuinely believe, is probably going to happen in this direction here, where people are going to try to outflank and set up crossfires on any defenders. Now, that's pretty much the forest dealt with. However, there's one other interesting feature, which is right over here. They've put a ridgeline in the middle of the field between the forest and the village that wasn't there before. And it's kind of subtle. But check that out. It completely breaks line of fire between the northern and southern ends of the map. And again, I think you're going to see people in fast mediums, light tanks, using this to get eyes on and spot targets as they cross the open field at the bottom there. This is probably going to be the kind of position that is valuable early on in the game and valuable late on in the game, but maybe not so much mid-game because of crossfire from over there. There is cover I mean, there are plenty of things that can block line of fire between yourself if you're spouting. Yeah, spouting. It's spotting and scouting at the same time. New word, just made it up. If you're using this ridgeline, you can be shot at from over there, but you know there's plenty of solid objects in the town that can offer you some measure of protection, but that spot there is going to be experts only. Now, from the northern spawn, moving onto the hill by the lighthouse, and again things have changed substantially in the corner of the map. For a start, you spawn an awful lot closer to this side, and secondly, once again, instead of there being a hill in this corner of the map, they've lowered the ground. And this really did give the team that started on the north, if they had something fast with a good view range, to get up onto this hill and spot, particularly in encounter mode, everybody on the team that attacked from the south. They could just light them all up, and it was very, very hard for the team that attacked from the south to do anything about it. Well, that's kind of not really possible anymore for a number of reasons. There are still spots where you can do that, but they're very, very limited. We're talking about places like this. There's not an awful lot of concealment there. And more importantly, you don't have direct line of sight anymore, because there's a tree here that's going to get in the way of your line of sight, and they've slapped the farmhouse right down here, which is going to make it very difficult to spot enemy tanks coming from the south from that position over there. Now the hill itself, again, and this is a common theme with a lot of the map remodeling, you're seeing a lot less concealment on the tops of these hills. You're no longer going to be able to just sit in the bushes, because there aren't any bushes, and shoot at whoever is being lit up by the guy spotting back there. It's just not possible anymore. The map no longer supports that kind of gameplay. And once again, over on this side of the map, you've got, well, a whole bunch of buildings that weren't there before. Same as on the opposite side. Again, I think this is probably where we're going to see a lot of the new fighting happen on Murovanka, because there's just so much cover here. Same deal over on this side. Very, very little. Well, there was never a huge amount of concealment available on this hill in the first place. The concealment that was on this hill in the previous versions of Murovanka didn't really allow you to fire in that direction, but it did allow you to fire in this direction. Well, this is mostly gone now as well. And you'll notice there's much more room here on this road that marks the halfway spot between these two hills. The town itself doesn't appear to have changed that much. There may be some subtle changes that have escaped me, but it kind of looks pretty similar to what we've all been used to in the current version of Murovanka. The one other thing that's changed on this map, and once again, it's all the corners of the maps and the sides of the maps that have changed. And again, it's to do with artillery. All four corners of the map seem to have been lowered to offer places for artillery to stay out of immediate line of sight of, well, pretty much everybody, but without an awful lot of concealment. You can see the farmhouse here hasn't really changed, but I've had endless frustrating games where there have been one or two artillery left at the end of the game, and I've come charging down here in a fast medium, and the first time I knew artillery was there was when he'd already unloaded into me and just blown me away with a shotgun blast right at the end of the game, because there was so much concealment here that even a massive, even something like the GWE 100 could easily hide in the woods behind that farmhouse. Well, not anymore. Now when you get overrun by mediums and light tanks, you're dead meat. But you can, again, lower ground, park your artillery here, and do your supporting fire throughout the main course of the game, safe from being spotted because you're below the line of sight of everything else on the battlefield. But once somebody breaks through, you're dead. And I really, really like that. Sorry, Artie. So there you go. That's the changes to Murovanka. I do like it. Particularly because of what they've done to the forest. It was just camper's paradise. Game after game after game. You would get half of your team camping the woods, well, the woods, camping the bushes on the hill that used to exist over here. The forest would be infested with enemy tank destroyers. Eventually, somebody would strap his man pants on, go into the woods, he would get spotted, somebody would shoot him, they would then give their position away by shooting him. Everybody over here would kill the one enemy tank destroyer that got lit up, and the guy that had moved into the woods was dead. And then the guys all over here would all look at each other and go, right, who's next? Well, that shouldn't happen anymore, and that can only be a good thing. So that's Murovanka in patch 9.3. I kind of like it. So that's it for this video. Coming up in future videos, we're going to be looking at new tanks. We're going to be looking at changes to existing tanks. KV-1S, the KV-85, the FV-304, the Hellcat, the T-18, the M5 Stuart, the T-92, the IS. 9.3 isn't just about the new tanks. There's a whole bunch of changes to dozens of vehicles that are already in the game. Covering all that in future videos. As always, take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.